2 Timothy 3, verse 1 says, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come," pretty much where we are. "For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power, and from such people turn away." The idea behind this lesson comes from, I was reading a sermon by C.H. Spurgeon. And the points that I'm making tonight are his points. So it's not original at all. I thought his points were valid and needed to be said again. Oxymorons. You like oxymorons? There are a lot of them. It's basically, if you don't know what an oxymoron is, you probably do, but it's a phrase that has contradictory terms embedded in the phrase. For example, here are a few: deafening silence, awfully good, open secret, freezer burn, silent scream, clearly misunderstood, bittersweet, civil war, definite possibility, exact estimate, extinct life, grow smaller, only choice, random order. One you're familiar with, I'm sure, jumbo shrimp, old news, original copy, plastic silverware, true fiction, virtual reality, and working vacation. Those are called oxymorons. Clara Barton with the Red Cross said something similar. So some sentences are like oxymorons. I distinctly remember forgetting that. Dolly Parton said, "You'd be surprised how much it costs to look this cheap." Isaac Singer, a novelist, said, "We must believe in free will. We have no choice." Mark Twain said, "It usually takes more than 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech." Samuel Goldwyn, film producer, you probably remember him, said, "A verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on." Those contain oxymorons, when you have two different ideas. And because of that, I was thinking about that when I heard the term. I was thinking about the word gay pride. That to me seems to be like an oxymoron. Now, in case you think that they have a pride problem and the rest of us are fine, we all have a pride problem. We all are too proud and won't admit our sin. You and I are not indispensable to the kingdom of God. Not one person in this building is too humble. You're not too humble. Even if you're the humblest person in this room, you're not too humble. In fact, I don't recall anybody being called too humble in the Bible. Do you remember that? In Paul's time, the term humble was repudiated. It was thought to be terrible. Pride was thought to be the thing you should have. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The very opposite of love is pride and arrogance, and it has to brag. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4 says, love does not brag and is not arrogant. Love does not brag and is not arrogant. So in other words, basically pride is the opposite of love. Pride is most often known by what it says about itself. Pride feels the need to brag and boast of what it thinks, who it is, what it does. I don't know, many of you watched the thing with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Any of y'all see any of that stuff back when it was happening? All right, so what caught my attention beyond the weirdness of all of that was a YouTuber named Emily D. Baker. Now, Emily D. Baker covered that whole thing with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Now, Emily D. Baker, I started watching her as a result, so now I'm kind of watch her stuff. Maybe you remember the Alex Murdaugh trial, all that. Some of y'all follow that? The murder of his wife and son. So maybe some of you follow that. Well, who Emily D. Baker is, and this is the reason I'm telling this whole story, is she was, for 17 years, she was a L.A. deputy district attorney, where she prosecuted criminals, various problems. One time she had these two criminals that were arrested, and they had pulled off several high crimes where they'd stolen a lot. And one of them thought he was a genius, and he was basically the mastermind. So he thought he was so much smarter than Emily, who was prosecuting, that he just could talk circles around her. So what Emily did was, Emily Baker said, she started bragging on the other guy, the guy that wasn't as smart and wasn't supposedly a genius, and started bragging on him, and he had the brilliant guy on the stand and kept asking him questions. So your friend, he came up with all this, right? Yes. And it's all him, right? And he figured out how to do this, and he figured out how to do that, and he did this, and he did that, and she kept piling on all the things he'd figured out. Finally, in the middle of all that, he says, that man couldn't have done all that. I did all that. And she said, okay, thank you. And she sat down. He was just convicted by his own words, by his own pride. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Pride will take us all down if we're not careful. And I guarantee you there's been a point in which you've been embarrassed because of your pride. And if you haven't, that really says even more about you, because you're never embarrassed. And that's bad. So what we want to do is look at 4 little truths, okay? And all of these, not original in me, but I thought it was such a brilliant concept. First of all, pride is baseless. We're going to look at four things tonight. Pride is baseless. No one, and not one good thing, is ever said about pride in the Bible. You look for it. We believe that there's a good pride. The Bible doesn't. You hear me? Not once. It's never used as a positive. Ever. And look at all the scriptures where it says bad things about it. Okay? No, we don't have time. Take a snapshot of it. Take it home with you. There is nothing to be proud of, is the point. Now think about that just for a second. You and I have nothing to be proud of related to us. Proverbs 13 verse 10 says, by pride, listen to the statement, by pride comes nothing but strife. That pretty well nails it shut, doesn't it? The only thing that pride gives you is trouble. So, pride goes before a fall, and it teaches us that we should avoid pride because it's absolutely baseless. You have no reason to have it. So if you're proud of something you've done, get over it. Calm down and realize you're saved by grace. Number 2, not only is pride baseless, pride is graceless. Not one person has ever been saved by pride. No one goes to heaven because he had pride in himself. That's never stated. You might have said it. You may think it's that because you've listened to our culture. But it's not in the Bible that way. And I know I'm probably making some of you who are into all this self-confidence kind of material that's out there feel rather offended. Grace is only for the humble. He doesn't extend grace to the proud. That's not stated ever. Grace is for the humble. But Habakkuk 2 and verse 4 says this, "Behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him. But the just," this is the key passage in the New Testament, "but the just shall live by faith." That's the passage Paul uses to prove we're saved by grace through faith. The just shall live by faith. What does he mean, live? In that text, he takes it to mean eternal life. If you're going to live eternally, you live eternally by faith. But look at what's in the beginning of this verse. "Behold the proud, his soul is not upright." So nothing in us, and this is a hard one to accept, nothing in us deserves to be forgiven. Nothing in us deserves to be saved. That was one of the hardest lessons that I ever learned. And I was insane at the time. And when I was having my emotional problems in South Africa, I realized that there was nothing in me apart from him that was worthy of anything. And that was if you've never come to a realization of that about yourself, you should. But it's a hard one when you're as proud as I was at that moment. So pride before a fall teaches us to avoid pride because pride is graceless. So it's baseless, it's graceless. Number next, I think this is 3. I get confused in these big numbers. Pride is shapeless. Pride is shapeless. What do I mean by that? Not one kind of pride is the exception to it. In other words, we want to think that there's an exceptional kind of pride. We want to, but you can't find it. Oh, listen, I've looked for it. You go look. I've looked for it. I wanted to find it. Pride comes in every shape. There is sociological pride. There is ecclesiastical pride, people who are just proud of church. There is psychological pride, proud of your psyche, your abilities in your brain. There's political pride. Y'all ever heard of that? People who look down on the other party? We've never heard of that in church, have we? Political pride. There's cultural pride. You don't believe that? Travel around the world a little bit. You'll find right away that every culture thinks their culture is the way it should be, or they'd be different. There is generational pride. Have you not felt it, young people, that old people talk down to you? Have you not felt it, old people, that young people talk down to you? There is national pride. America is the greatest. You know, the worst place to do that is on a mission trip. Please don't do that. Don't go on a mission trip and talk about how you think America. It's natural to love your country, but please shut up about it in another country. And when we were living in South Africa, I hated to see an American coming. It was an embarrassment to me. They wouldn't shut up. Oh, we've got that in America. Oh, we do that. Oh, we got that better in America. Do you not know that everybody loves their country? It doesn't mean what you think it means. There's racial pride. There's a racial pride that thinks your race is the coolest and every other race is the worst. And I don't care what color you are, that hits everybody. There's moral pride. I've been moral, therefore I am great because I am a moral person. There's physical pride. I can beat you up. Or I can lift 75 pounds more than you can. There is mental pride. Oh, I'm sharp. I'm the smartest cookie in the room. My IQ is 145 plus. Okay. There's intellectual pride because you were able to take really good tests. There's educational pride. I have 17 degrees behind my name. There's narcissistical pride. Whereas, you have to love me, I'm just too good looking. Now, guys don't generally say that, although they do. But a woman or two has been known to think they're beautiful. I've had women tell me, oh, I know I'm beautiful. I'm like, okie dokie. There's sexual pride, thinking your sex is better than someone else's, male or female. There's entirely too much of that going on in our society, that we're having arguments about what's better, a man or a woman. That's ridiculous conversations. God made one, He made the other one. How do you take pride in something God did? There's homosexual pride, which kind of made reference to before. There's financial pride. I make more than you do. Okay. Or I make less than you do. Okay. Neither one makes you better than anybody else, by the way. There's influential pride. Oh, I know the governor. Okay. So I know a lot of crooks too. So there's religious pride. So our church is going to heaven and your church isn't. And then there's secular pride. So there's all kinds of shapes. But what I'm trying to get to is, no matter what shape you put it in, you're not saved by pride, you're saved by grace. 1 John 2, verse 16 says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world." This pride business is not from God, it's from the devil. But we want to think it's a wonderful thing. Pride before a fall. Now, I know some of you out there, you've already figured out 15 ways that there's a way that I'm misinterpreting the word. That's your pride thinking there. But you may be right, because that's my pride thinking there. Who struggles with pride? I'm looking at them, and you are too, the people who struggle with pride. And if you don't think you struggle with pride, you struggle with it more than anybody else in the room. Pride before a fall teaches us to avoid pride because pride is shapeless. It affects all kinds of stuff. It's not over here in this one little box and not over here. It's in this problem, but it's not in that. No, it's not the way pride works. It fits into any box you're in. And you can look down on folks from anywhere when you're looking up at them. Last one. Pride is defenseless. So it is baseless, it is graceless, it is shapeless, and it's defenseless. Not one person can avoid the damage that it causes. Pride causes damage. It first causes damage to you, but then it causes damage to the people around you. They used to say that pride is that weird sickness that makes everybody else sick. Many so-called great leaders, some of the greatest we've read about, have been struck down because of their pride. You ever heard of a guy named Moses? Numbers chapter 20, 1 through 13. What kept Moses out of Canaan land? Oh, he's just old and he died. Well, he did die, but that ain't the reason he didn't go to Canaan land. He didn't go to Canaan land because he was proud and he lost his temper and he spoke inadvisedly to the people of God and called them a bunch of rebels. Like he had no problems, but they had trouble. Well, that's never true. You've never seen a speaker up here that didn't have trouble. What about when you're a king? Well, kings don't have this kind of problem. King Nebuchadnezzar, literally the most powerful man in the world at the time, Daniel chapter 4, verses 28 through 29, because he walked around, saw all the things he had made, and he became so chuffed with himself, he said, by my own hand I've created all these things. And in that same hour he struck, and he spent several months out in the field with his hair looking like feathers, eating grass like a cow. He lost his marbles for a while because he was full of pride. 2 Chronicles 26:16, King Uzziah, great king. King Uzziah was a good king of Israel. He really was. There are many good things I could say about King Uzziah. But he got full of himself at some point, and when he got full of himself, he decided that he was such a good man, he could go into the temple of the Lord himself, and he could offer incense just like the priest did. And while he was doing it, the priest came in and says, this is not for you, king. You're a good man, but this is not for you. You need to get out of here. And he fussed with them, and he was struck with leprosy. And he was a leper the rest of his life. In Acts chapter 12, verse 23, King Herod made a speech. And he's wearing, according to history, he's wearing a kind of a gold kind of outfit. There was gold all waved into the material. So his outfit glowed in the sun. So he made this speech trying to make friends with some people he'd made mad. And they said, oh, behold, the voice of a God. And he didn't repudiate it. He accepted it. And he was struck immediately with worms. And about 3 days later, he died in a horrible way. Now, most recently, these are not the only people who have had real serious problems with pride. We all have a problem with pride. Not all of us have that serious of a problem. But these people had serious problems. But there were others. You might have heard a guy named Mussolini. People hung him. Hitler, he killed himself. Nicolae Ceausescu, his people killed him and drug him through the streets. In Wikipedia, there's 349 heads of government and heads of state that have been assassinated and executed by their people because the people realized they've elevated themselves too far. Full of themselves. See, you can fall through pride. And that's the reason Proverbs 16:18 that was read a while ago simply says, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. On the day of judgment, how many proud people do you think there'll be? How many proud people do you think there'll be that says, I will not kneel? Don't talk down to me, God. I know more than you do. You will kneel. And you will be the humblest you've ever been. There's not been a night when you were alone and you were crying that you will ever be as humble as you'll be that moment. Nothing can defend you if you're dependent on pride. But humility, that might get you somewhere that day. So pride before a fall teaches us to avoid pride because pride is defenseless. Pride is baseless, it's graceless, it's shapeless, it's defenseless. How often Have our words betrayed us? I know we all think we're humble. Have you not noticed it? I look in the mirror and I get more humble every day. We portray ourselves as humble. We even use words to describe ourselves as humble. But our words prove that we're proud and we're haughty. And we think ourselves superior to some people. In Luke 19, verse 22, out of your own mouth I will judge you. I'm afraid that will happen to us all. Matthew 12 and verse 37, by your words you'll be justified, and by your words you'll be condemned. Let me give you an example of that. Last thing up there. You remember the movie 1992? It's probably the best movie, in my opinion, that Tom Cruise ever made before this last Top Gun. A Few Good Men. In that movie, Lieutenant Kaffee is Tom Cruise, and Jack Nicholson, great actor, is Colonel Jessup. And Colonel Jessup had ordered a code red, and I don't know if that's a big thing or not a big thing. It was important in the movie because two young men were being basically put on trial for having done the code red. Code red is when you basically, rough up one of the guys because he's not keeping up or whatever. So Kaffee asks Colonel Jessup, did you order the code red? And Jessup said, I did my job. And Kaffee said, did you order the code red? And finally he says, you bet your blankety blank blank I ordered the code red. What did that do to him? Immediately he was arrested. It's just a movie. But it's the same thing. Whenever you start thinking, I can get away, I have the right, you can't talk to me, that's when you get in trouble. That's the moment. That's when it happens to us all. When we start thinking, you owe me. No, they don't. No. 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 Maybe we don't know how to humble ourselves. Maybe we don't. Let me read a couple of scriptures. 1 Peter 5 and 6. Be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. That gives us a little insight. James 4, verses 6 through 10 says this, trying to figure out what humility really is. God resists the proud, so all our proud acts get resisted. There's pushback on it. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, submit to God. That's the reverse of pride. You submit to God. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners. And yeah, he's talking to members of the church. Cleanse your hands, you sinners. Purify your heart, you double-minded, because I know you've been in two places in your head. So have I. Lament. Mourn. Weep. What's there to lament, mourn, and weep about? Oh, now we know who's the proud one. You sinned. When's the last time you lamented it? When's the last time you were in tears about your sin? Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter, everything's so funny, right? Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Why? Because verse 10, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. That's the only lifting up you need, is whatever he will give you. That's it. So submit, clothe yourself with humility, draw near to God, cleanse your hands, purify your hearts, lament, mourn, weep. Those are things that reflect humility. We're fixed to have an invitation. Here's the deal. There's no such thing as a person coming forward in invitation proudly. I'm not sure there is such a thing as anybody worshiping God proudly. Is there? So what good does it do you? Oh, I know. Well, you got to believe in yourself. I've heard all of that. I've read all those books too. I'm just telling you the Bible tonight. You can believe whatever you want, and I'm sure you will. You know, when you hear something like that, it kind of makes you realize that somebody else is in control, doesn't it? Don't come with pride. Come in humility. You know, there's two principles. I don't talk about this very much. This is not really what my lesson's about, but I just thought I'd share this right now. There's the normative principle, and there's the regulatory principle. Okay, the normative principle says, and it's a principle of how to understand the Bible. The normative principle basically says if it isn't forbidden, it's allowed. You can do whatever the Bible doesn't say you can't do. I mean, I believe that principle. But I don't believe it applies to everything. But I do believe in the principle. I'll tell you where it applies, I think, in a minute. But then there's a regulatory principle. Now, regulatory principle basically says this. If it isn't authorized, it's automatically forbidden and you shouldn't do it. So which one is correct? If it isn't forbidden, it's allowed. Or if it isn't authorized, it's forbidden. Which one is correct? They're both correct. But they apply to two different things. And if you don't recognize that, you're probably full of pride. So where does the normative principle apply? Day-to-day life. You go in the grocery store, you don't have to ask God whether or not you should get milk or you should get ice cream, whatever. It's up to you. You make up decisions on your own. It's pretty much how you live your life. If it isn't forbidden, you can have it. You can eat ice cream and go to heaven. There are people who don't believe you can. You can eat meat and go to heaven. There are people that don't believe you can do that too. Yeah, there are a lot of things you can do that other people frown on because the Bible doesn't say one way or the other, because it's just your day-to-day activities. But when we come here to worship God, if it isn't authorized, it's forbidden. And if we don't treat it that way, then we approach God in a very haphazard, arrogant way. This is the divine being. There's only one. We must be very careful how we approach him. We must be very humble in how we approach him. It's why we don't have instrumental music. That principle right there, that's it. It is why we don't have women speakers and preachers. You may think we should. You believe in the normative principle. I, however, don't believe in having belly dancers in worship. And anything else. Why? Because, well, that's not forbidden either. The list is without an end if we use the normative principle for worship. But if you use the regulatory principle and whatever isn't authorized is forbidden, then guess what? We have a limited things that we can do, about 5 things, and we do those 5 things, and that's it. You know what? That's the humble path. Which way do you worship? Humbly or arrogantly and insist on what you want? How do you live? Humbly or arrogantly and insist on what you want? I think the lesson and the sound above me suggests we ought to approach God as humbly as we can. If you're not right with God, we'll give you an opportunity by an invitation now to make that right. I haven't really preached on that subject, but whatever your need, let it be known while we stand and while we sing.